The Solar Podcast is brought to you by Continental Energy Solutions. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Today on the Solar Podcast, energy storage systems integration. My guest today is Eneon-ES and their Director of Business Development, Jason Beacock. Welcome to the Solar Podcast, Jason.
Thank you, Tim.
As all of our listeners know, solar and storage is all the rage. As lithium-ion technology improves and new storage technologies come on the scene, here in Illinois, we are installing our first flow battery this year. We've been doing lithium ion for about 5 years, and all of the utilities are doing major either wind and storage or solar and storage or just storage, applications across the United States and Canada. And one of the things we're going to talk about is the growth of the storage industry, short-term storage, long-term storage, and the importance of systems integration. But give us some background on yourself, Jason, up there in Calgary, Canada. How did you come to the storage industry?
Being from Calgary, I think we're pretty synonymous in the city and this province for being associated with oil and gas. I've been in oil and gas for over 20 years, or I was. I came from a family. My dad was in oil and gas for 32 years. And I made the transition. I started working actually with startups. And this was about 4 or 5 years ago. The company I worked with at the time, who is one of the parents of this organization, started a internal technology accelerator. And we were looking for technologies to fund, support, bring onto our line card that helped reduce greenhouse gas emissions in oil and gas production. So that really embedded me into the world of new technology, the world of renewables, and it piqued my interest. And I've always been watching renewables. I mean, I remember investing into solar companies 20 years ago, personally investing, and it was a little early at the time, but I mean, we're at that space now where, arguably in the middle or at the beginning stages of the energy transition. And so I had an opportunity to work with energy storage with Canadian Energy, the other parent company in Eneon-ES. And when the opportunity came up, I snapped it up. This was 2 years ago. And I don't regret it one little bit at this point. It's a great opportunity to transition energy intelligence into a new place. And as we were talking before we started the podcast, that's an important thing to me is supporting people in our province into the energy transition and helping them realize that, these skill sets are transferable. I mean, there's a lot of things we can bring in terms of energy intelligence from the oil and gas world into renewables. So that's how I got started in the space.
Excellent. Yeah, I want to talk about a just transition because as we are hiring thousands and thousands of people into the renewables industry, including solar storage, wind, geothermal, and others like pumped hydro, that there is also a carbon bubble going on. There are going to be stranded assets. There's a collapse of the oil industry. It's a slow collapse right now, right? But it will accelerate. But it's not an either or, it's a both and world. And most of the workers in the fossil industries can transition successfully into other industries. We need lots of engineers. We need lots of laborers to do these installations. It's a lot of lifting heavy stuff and moving it around and moving the earth and driving piles and installing concrete pads and pipe and wire. So fear not. I often get inquiries or comments on LinkedIn from people in other energy industries, nuclear and fossil industries. and there seems to be a somewhat of an antagonism there, but
Mm.
I don't see solar, wind, and storage as antagonistic to other industries. It's just different. And humanity is at a turning point. If we are going to have a safe future for future generations, we just have to do this. And it's just a question of how quickly we will make the transition. So let's talk a little more about how you personally made the transition and how your skills translated. And give us a little more background at the same time about Eneon, if you would.
Yeah, well, just a few points on what you just said. I mean, I think there's a bit of fear built up around the transition itself. I mean, people, I know a lot of people with 20 years experience in oil and gas, and I think they see that, the new world of energy doesn't have a place for them, or think that it doesn't have a place for them. And that's absolutely not true. And like you said, I get inquiries all the time on LinkedIn, not necessarily animosity, but certainly, trying to understand where they can fit in new energy. You call it new energy. So it's great. I mean, there's lots of great conversations happening. There's organizations here in Alberta that I know of that are specifically focused on transitioning skill sets from oil and gas to renewables. So it's working, it's happening. Like I said, for me, it's always been there for me in terms of renewables. And, there was, and I hate to say it, but I mean, working in oil and gas, I loved what I did. It was great people, great organizations, but it didn't really sit well with me sometimes, some of the things that I was doing. So again, I've always been having conversations internally with the organization I work with, to look in other places. And, when that opportunity came up to work with the accelerator, it was great because, we had some regime change provincially in the government, and they had a mandate of reducing emissions overall in the province. And they really put their foot down essentially with oil and gas. And there was a lot of people worried in oil and gas, but we took that as an opportunity to look for new technologies to, mitigate those emissions. So, that's really where I had an opportunity to dive in first. And then when we started doing energy storage. So we're Eneon-ES is a part of a group of companies in it's called Solve for X. Solve for X has been around in low voltage energy storage since 1949 as Canadian Energy. Started out in distribution, has since grown to, or local distribution, has since grown to international distribution and manufacturing. And we, as under the auspice of Canadian Energy, built our first large scale stationary storage system in 2015. So we've developed that product line. We have a test and R&D facility in Markham, Ontario. And over the 5 years since or I guess 7 years since we put out our first system now, we've had a number of successes that's facilitated the spinning off of Eneon-ES into the fourth of the four group or companies under the Solve for X banner. And we focus solely on battery energy storage, high voltage battery energy storage for applications ranging from microgrid, EV charging to solar plus storage. So that's our focus. And really what we are focusing on is being a truly turnkey battery energy storage provider. It's one of the turnkey is one of those terms that I have not issue with, but there's a lot of differential between what some people see as turnkey, especially in battery energy storage. So we want to provide a complete solution in battery energy storage to our clients. And that's why we developed out the Eon 360 package. Oh, lost sound there. Oh, you're on mute. There you go.
Some people think that the storage market is quite small because we hear about a limited number of brands here in the United States. Once you get under the covers, you realize that, yeah, you hear a lot about the Tesla Powerwall, maybe. And because Tesla is such an amazing marketing machine, and they do make very good products, and we've installed a lot of their commercial stationary storage products. But, you know, there's over 50 major manufacturers of battery storage systems. And, you know, of course, everyone who makes consumer electronics is into storage now, from LG to Samsung, you know, you name it. And you know, Samsung and LG are two of the world's leaders, but then there's companies like CATL, which are just not household names. But if you are into commercial storage, you realize that they're a real player, and they're providing the cells for these other companies like Tesla.
Right.
And you know, Tesla also is really getting into that vertical integration. They're going to start making their own cells and making bigger cells. So they're trying to disrupt the industry, which is great. There's a need for more innovation, but it's still it's very early days for storage. Even though when you see the news about storage projects in the United States, it's mostly happening on the coasts, and we have really good storage markets in Massachusetts, New York, California, Hawaii.
Yep.
Even here in Illinois, we're doing sizable storage projects, and with increasing frequency. And now the utilities are making the transition from coal and natural gas fired power plants here in the Midwest to renewables and storage based plants. And literally all of the major utilities are issuing RFPs for these are hundreds of megawatts or gigawatts of solar storage or solar wind and storage energy projects. So let's step into some of the details, though, of what is storage integration. What does it involve? And what are the opportunities? And, you know, what is your raison d'etre, so to speak, at Eneon-ES?
Right. Well, you know, just something interesting about the uptake of storage. I think 2019, the US was, you know, just sub of $4 billion. I think you're seeing up to 13, 14 billion dollars within the next 5 years invested in battery energy storage. And you know, just to reiterate, I don't know if I said it at the beginning, we are a Canadian company. And the energy storage market is a little bit different here in Canada. I mean, we have Canada's about 60% hydro. Some provinces in Canada are, you know, up in the 90% hydro. So, you know, we're heavily renewables integrated already. So we've, for now, until Canada catches up on the energy storage side of things, which they are, but nowhere in the neighborhood of these 200 megawatt hour systems that we're seeing in the US. So we're focused on the US right now. And as you mentioned, I think there's 9 states in the US now that have state level regulation around battery energy storage implementation. But really, you know, what we're focused on is, like I said, building or offering that full turnkey battery energy storage system. You spoke to about some of the integrators that are on the market now, and I think, like I said, there's a differential between, you know, what turnkey means to different people. To us, it means a complete battery energy storage system, right from, well, it's actually, let me step back. So I'd mentioned the Eon 360 package. To us, that is a fully wrapped battery energy storage system, right from engineering and design of the system to long-term operational support of the system. So there's 6 pillars within that Eon 360. And this is getting to your question of what we think sets us apart. The first pillar of that system is the design and integration. And really, this is where we see a lot of the missing link with turnkey battery energy storage systems. We want to be embedded with the client at the inception of that project. At first concept and understanding, and it helps us help the client understand the intricacies of the energy storage system as it relates to all of the other systems that are going on at that site. So, on a solar plus storage, you might have the interconnect, you might have your generation source, if it's front of meter, the interconnect. If it's behind the meter, you might have your load profiles, and then you have the storage, and then you have the balance of system, and how all of that stuff relates is really important. So we can help you maximize the value out of your energy storage system as it's relating to these other systems in the plant. Again, that's one of the areas where we see the client trying to take a lot of that on themselves. And then they get to a point where they realize, wait a second, this is not the optimally sized battery. It might not be the best chemistry for what you're trying to do. So we want to be embedded at the very beginning to help our clients understand how to best set up that energy storage system as it relates to the rest of the systems. Another piece of that turnkey verbiage is around integration. And what does integration mean? Some people, it means dropping a can of batteries, BMS, and racks at site, and you doing the rest of the integration with another partner. To us, it means doing a full system in our 80,000 square feet indoor integration facility, making or putting together all of the componentry within that system itself, and doing the full testing of that system while it sits in our integration facility. So again, this is another piece that's, I think, a big differential. A lot of the testing and assembly is going on at site in a lot of cases. So we do that before it hits site and make sure you have a fully operational system by the time it hits site. So
we should probably mention, some of the use cases for storage. There's backup power, there's microgrids, there's frequency regulation or grid services. Is there a specific use case where you are seeing a lot of action right now?
yeah, certainly the solar plus storage in the US. I mean, Massachusetts is one of our biggest markets in that area right now. Grid connected solar plus storage, I would say we're probably a 20-80 mix on behind the meter, in front of the meter, solar plus storage applications in that jurisdiction. I mean, the state level regulation in Massachusetts is amazing. I mean, I hope to see that as a model for a lot of other states moving forward. Amazing so far. I mean, I don't know if all the kinks have been worked out or the implications of the regulation have been realized quite yet, but I mean, for us, it's great. And I think for end users and developers, I mean, it's a great program. So we're focused on that. Microgrid as well. The microgrid is big in Canada here, especially in the north. We're seeing a lot of communities in the north that are run off diesel generation, and they're looking to get off that diesel generation. So a renewables microgrid implementing either wind or solar or both is typically and energy storage is typically the scenario that we see there. So those are the two areas that we're mostly focused on. There's other applications that we're always looking at, especially in oil and gas. You have big facilities that need resiliency or backup power. So those are high C rating type battery applications, always looking at those. And to reduce greenhouse gas emissions too in oil and gas production. So, solar plus storage potentially, or wind plus storage. So those are the applications that we're focused on right now.
I'm glad you mentioned Massachusetts. They have something called the SMART program. And in Massachusetts now, any project with a solar array of 500 kW DC or greater is required to integrate battery storage with the project. So that, of course, is driving the application of storage in Massachusetts. New York also has storage specific incentives. And, storage is so good for the grid, right? Because it's a
Yeah,
shock absorber. The
yeah.
complaint about renewables as you reach penetration, right? 50% or more, like we have now in California, is the so-called duck curve. Um, because solar is intermittent. It's great in the middle of the day. You can really hammer back your demand charges, your overall consumption of energy. But then in the evening, when the sun goes down, you have to have battery storage to be there as an instantaneous supply when people are coming home from work and turning on their electric ovens and the air conditioning, et cetera. And so as wind and solar become more common, it's just really good and makes good engineering sense to have a lot of storage. And you truly see this in the early adopting markets in the Californias, Hawaii's, New York State, and Massachusetts. So if you're in a state that doesn't have storage specific incentives, fear not, they are coming. Here in Illinois, our governor has, made a statement last year that they will have storage specific incentives. It's just a matter of when. And COVID-19 has slowed down some of that energy legislation here in Illinois, and I'm sure in many other places, but it's coming. We have a 25% RPS today. We're going to get 100% RPS. We're going to follow the New York states and Californias of the world. And so it's going to be a rocket ship. Now, you know, the downside of storage is that it's complicated. It's not a simple plug and play. You get a battery, you put it in a box, you hook it up, and everything is hunky dory, right? You have to really know what you're doing
Mhm,
on the engineering side, and you have to have really good hardware and software. It's a both and
mhm,
hardware and software to make a complete package that is easy to control, is intelligent, does what it's supposed to do when it's supposed to do it, so to speak, and makes that all easy to operate from a human perspective. So let's get into some of the guts of that, because I noticed that you guys have made a mark by building battery container solutions, right? Um, and just the battery container is a space, right, where there's room for innovation. There was a major accident in
absolutely.
2019 in Arizona with a container that had a buildup of hazardous materials that then exploded and injured some first responders. And that's not good for anybody. It just gives storage a questionable name. People forget that there's all kinds of accidents all the time with,
Yeah,
many technologies. And so there's no doubt that we can absolutely do safe and reliable energy storage. It's just, we have to
absolutely.
get smarter about how we go about that. And it's a little bit bespoke today. While there are some integrators like Tesla who offer kind of a truly turnkey solution under one brand name, even though there's many different products integrated within a Tesla application,
Mhm,
or it's a DIY world and you're patching together several different solutions under one roof.
mhm.
And maybe there's pros and cons to that.
Yeah, well, I think, and getting back, on the Tesla, the power packs, I mean, it's it's interesting, that we call that a full turnkey solution. But if we have to add PCS or DC to DC conversion on those systems, that's another component that has to be added, whether it's another enclosure or whatever it may be. So this is kind of what I mean around the turnkey terminology that we have in industry. because our systems are integrated with the PCS or DC to DC conversion inherent to the system. And it's, and that's what I was talking about earlier on the integration and the design and engineering, is ensuring all of these systems are built as one. And there's a lot of value there. Rather than having separate systems and integrating those systems together, we complete it as a single system. Just to get back to your question, so we have the batteries, racks, and modules integrated into our systems, the fire suppression system, the control systems, the HVAC, DC combiners, balance of system, and of course the enclosure. And enclosure is also another consideration here. I mean, we build our systems with R12 to R20 insulation. We can get down to minus 40 degrees Celsius. Not that you see that too much, I'm sure, in Illinois, but I mean, it's a consideration up here. But this is also high heat to keep that, the HVAC operating optimally within that system. And that's a big differential on how people build their enclosures as well. So I would challenge people that are putting together battery energy storage systems, look at all of this componentry and, rather than saying, hey, I've got a turnkey system here, or they're offering me the full system. Well, take a look at those specific components within that system. Is there everything you need within that system? And then, things as simple as the building. I know, and I do not want to disparage other people on this podcast at all. I think everybody puts out great products in their own right. But, I've heard of issues of condensation building up in the systems because the HVAC wasn't sufficient, or overheating or underheating of those systems, or because there's no insulation on the enclosures themselves. Integrating two separate systems, like I said earlier, the PCS or the DC to DC conversion separately causing issues. So, when you're thinking about putting together an energy storage system, I would invite you as early as you can to engage your energy storage provider in understanding the complexities of that system, and they can help you understand how that energy storage system fits into your overall system, and help you with that upfront understanding of sizing, power and energy, HVAC requirements, auxiliary loads, all of the things that, are really important upfront in understanding how to put that system together.
So if you're an EPC or a developer doing, let's just say, solar and storage projects, at what stage of a project's development do they interface with a company like Eneon?
I mean, as soon as you can, I think, and that's what we're seeing lately. I mean, part of the issue is, and no slams on developers or EPCs, but what we're typically seeing is there's not a lot of expertise there. I mean, it depends how evolved, I guess, or if what importance they put on energy storage. But typically, you're going to see maybe somebody that manages it, but really having that high level understanding of energy storage itself. We don't see that within those organizations, which is fine, because that's where your energy storage provider should fill that gap for you. And like I said, I mean, there's different types of scenarios when you're looking at these projects as well. Sometimes energy storage isn't going to be added until completion of the project and the second round of funding for that project. But even so, I mean, if you're thinking of adding storage to your solar plant after it's been running, I mean, that's also a time to have design considerations and implementing of the storage down the road. And then there's a lot of intricacies, let's say, around solar clipping, and storing that making most value of that clipping with your storage. How does that balance with the interconnect sizing? Questions around technology, like I said earlier. I mean, if you're going after frequency regulation, that might be a completely different battery than long duration storage for solar plus storage. So, and I don't think a lot of people realize that that's the case sometimes, or some people don't. So, you know, there's a lot of considerations, including technologies, integration, how everything works together, what you actually need, that needs to come under consideration right out of the gates.
Yeah, we work a lot with a company called Intelligent Generation based here in Chicago. They're a spinoff from IIT.
Great group of guys there.
Yeah, I was glad to
And
hear
women,
that you're
sorry.
working with Intelligent Generation, Mark Throom and Jay Marhofer. They've really made quite a name for themselves here in PJM and MISO. And so we're very blessed to have a very skilled partner in them.
Yeah,
We can do the engineering, but we need a lot of ideas and information about what's practical, how things pencil. That's the thing is every facility is different, and every geographic location has a different value stack. And so if you're a developer working in several regions of the country, you're really drinking from a fire hose when it comes to the variety of ways that
yeah,
solar and storage pays back in different markets. Even here in Illinois, one of the challenges is that only 1 in 10 solar and storage projects will pencil, so to speak, meaning
yeah,
when you add storage, it creates a shorter ROI than solar alone.
yeah.
And with incentives, we have a payback period of say 5 to 6 years for solar alone. Sometimes with storage, we can get down to 3 years,
Hmm.
and that is generating a greater ROI in the long run, which is just wonderful.
Yeah.
And so it's a win-win. But do you then collaborate with Intelligent Generation, or is it a tripartite approach where you're working directly with the EPC as well as the Intelligent Generations of the world?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I like to bring or we like to bring in as many parties as we can into the conversation. And yeah, just back to the Intelligent Generation folks, they're very astute at what they do. That's one organization that has a high level of energy storage intelligence behind them. But yes, to get to your question, how do we like to engage when working on a project? I mean, we work with a developer in Massachusetts now, where we work with them. We work with their EPC. We work with the financier and long-term operator. We work with our support on the utility interconnection. We support on the construction side of things. So we're talking to all of these facets of that project. And it just ensures the highest level of success when everybody involved has the highest level of intelligence or understanding about how everything is interacting at that site. And I mean, there's a huge difference between kind of being a side thought in terms of, gathering information and being a part of the entire life cycle and supporting in that. And it just moves projects along so much more smoothly.
Well, I know you guys are working on launching a new product suite, so let's talk about that. You've mentioned PCS and the container, but let's give that full suite overview, if you would.
Sure. I mean, I spoke to the first two pillars of the Eon 360 platform. We call it a platform because it's an incorporation of the engineering, the products, the integration. But the next four pillars that we are adding into that mix are operational maintenance. So we have agreements across North America, so that's Canada and the US, for long-term operational support of our systems. This is a big one too, and kind of an afterthought when it comes to these systems. You know, and again, like developers run the gambit of their capabilities. I mean, large developers will have O&M contracts inherent to what they do. Small developers won't typically. So we want to be able to accommodate everybody in that mix with people that are really understanding of long-term operational maintenance of battery energy storage systems. You know, and coming from a mechanical world, there's nothing compared to, you know, processes and other energy markets. It's pretty low maintenance overall in terms of energy storage, but there are some things that need to be looked after if you want to get the most life out of your system. You know, 10, 15, 20-year assets need to be looked after to get that life out of them. So we want to support our clients, and if they don't have that available, that we'll supplement with long-term O&M contracts. So that's one of the things, pillar 3, let's call it. The fourth thing is comprehensive warranties. Again, you know, all of these pillars were built on our conversations with clients over the last 7 years and what was important to them, and some of the things that were missing and the questions that we always got, and things that they were trying to supplement on their own. So again, we wanted to give the most complete package possible. The warranties are extremely important, and I mean, more complicated than people think. On a system, you're typically going to see manufacturer warranties on the major equipment, like batteries, BMS and racks, PCS, and then you have the balance of system warranties. So the balance of system would be carried by us, and we can extend those out up to 10 years, or, you know, upon client request, longer. But there's also the warranties that come from the manufacturers, and, you know, tier 1 manufacturers want to know that you're collecting the data, operational data, and the parameters to how those batteries have been operated, and that needs to be maintained throughout the entirety of that warranty. So we'll do that as part of that package. We'll manage the pass-through warranties from the manufacturers, the extended warranties through the manufacturers, and negotiate with them on your behalf if there is an issue. And again, negotiate those warranty terms if there's extensions beyond the 10 to 15 years requested. So the warranty is another item. Remote monitoring is another pillar of that Eneon 360. So making sure that that piece of equipment or that asset is operating optimally for the life of the system, but also doing things like predictive analytics or predictive maintenance on that system. So finding issues before they happen and mitigating those issues before they happen. You know, we're collecting a large amount of data from these systems, and we have an opportunity to understand that data to a point where we can predict where issues are going to happen, and, like I said, mitigate them before they happen. This is also part and parcel to data visualization. So having the client be able to access their data and understand instantaneous operation parameters or trending or historical parameters around their system. And then the final piece of the Eneon 360 platform is the intelligent dispatch. So this is layering another layer, third-party software onto the system. We can do dispatch with our inherent or proprietary control system for things like smart or clean peaks in Massachusetts. So time of day dispatch, simple. But, you know, there's another layer of market accessibility in wholesale capacity or ancillary markets that are really dictated by the market in that point of time. So partnering with a software provider that understands those markets and gives us market signals to be able to dispatch our system at the most opportune times. So again, that is, you know, a layer that we wanted to add to help our clients get as much value as possible out of their systems monetarily. And the rest is, you know, getting the most life and operability out of the system as possible. So really, we've left nothing on the table in terms of our offering. There really shouldn't be anything else that you would need to look at in terms of battery energy storage to complete your system. And that's what we mean by turnkey. All of the equipment you need, all of it integrated into a single system, all of the support you need to operate that system long term, and all of the software you would need to access the most advantageous markets available.
Very cool. So in the last few minutes that we have here, Jason, what else should our listeners know about Eneon and the storage industry? You know, it is a fast moving industry. I'm going to put your website on screen. We'll give our listeners your contact info and how to get a hold of you. But what else should our listeners know?
Yeah, I mean, the world of energy storage is fast moving, and we can support you in understanding, you know, that fast moving world. I mean, you look at DC to DC coupled solar plus storage, the first commercially available DC to DC converter was came out in 2018. And now, you know, we're going to see that as an industry standard. And that's what we do with our clients is we stay on top of the newest technologies, the newest applications, you know, and bring that value to our client and bring the entire turnkey package to our clients in battery energy storage.
And when you look into your crystal ball, you know, I'm glad you mentioned DC coupled storage. Heretofore, we've been doing strictly AC coupled storage. It does seem like DC coupled storage is staged to burst onto the scene and grab onto a bigger slice of the pie. And I had Hanan Fishman
Yeah,
on the show to talk about DC coupled storage.
probably the most knowledgeable guy in that space that I know.
Yeah, one of the smartest guys I've ever interviewed too.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
I'm glad you didn't ask me as tough of questions as you asked him, so thanks.
So that's, yeah, it's one of the fun things about my job here is I get to talk to so many interesting people.
Mhm.
and and truly, you know, you guys are in an industry which is somewhat rocket science. You know, for the most part, renewable energy industries are not rocket science. Installing a solar array is not rocket science, but installing a you know, an integrated battery storage solution that works 24/7, there is a little bit of rocket science there, I have to say.
Yeah,
And and you know, your job is really hard because you're dealing with a variety of different manufacturers, and that's a very dynamic landscape, as we've said several times here. You know, the EV explosion, right? The electrification of transportation is going to start sopping up a
yeah,
huge amount of
yeah.
batteries.
Yeah, it
And
already is, yeah.
and so you know, that there are going to be shortages of battery cells. That's one of the reasons why companies like Tesla are getting more vertically integrated. They're going to start mining potentially lithium,
Yeah,
and and then there's just a plethora of technologies. You know, the fuel cell technology is starting to go mainstream. It's been, you know, it's been in the waiting room for 20
yeah,
years.
yeah,
We're going to see hydrogen now come
yeah.
on strong, but how do you guys stay ahead of the curve, so to speak, and what are you looking for when you're sourcing products? Because it is it's a little bit of the wild west, and it is a dynamic landscape. You can't rely on just one supplier for, say, battery cells, for example, right?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. And I think, you know, I saw that a lot in my world in the startup world when we were working with the accelerator. We have these great technologies, but we're asking some of the biggest oil companies in the world to implement these technologies in their operations, that have essentially been bench tested. And that is not something that's going to happen in that world. And I mean, I think we got a little more flexibility. We're not going to blow up an entire plant here if something goes wrong, but we're going to, these are expensive pieces of equipment and we want to protect them. So we always look for tier one manufacturers of the technologies that we implement. So that's a good place to start. We're lucky to have great relationships with tier one manufacturers. I mean, that was a great place to start. And I mean, where we're headed, we're always looking. I mean, it's just part of my DNA. I've been doing it for a while. That's part of my job as business development, is to understand what's coming down the pipe. We know that we more than likely have a limited time with lithium ion in industry. What that exactly is, we don't know. I mean, we're out in a number of years. It's not disappearing tomorrow. But we know that there's going to be other technologies that come online that could potentially be better. And, really there are some out there, but it's the cost that's holding them out right now. So we're staying close to that. Like you said, with the EV market, EV is really what was the facilitator or the driver behind the dive in lithium ion costs and the steep rise in energy density in these batteries, and really put them at a point. And just over the last couple of years, that made it the first time in history where it made economic sense to implement these types of technologies. This won't be the last. Like you said earlier, energy storage is that missing piece and renewable integration or renewable transition. And we're there now. We've got this first piece. Now we can move ahead. And I hear those comments often about lithium ion or batteries and, the overall environmental impact and life cycle. And I mean, it drives me bonkers sometimes. I mean, oil and gas 150 years ago, they dug a pit and dumped the oil directly into the pit. Do they do that anymore? No. I mean, they've gotten way better at reducing emissions, increasing safety, and getting highly efficient in what they do and less destructive. I mean, it's the same with renewables. We have our piece now, our first piece. We're just going to get better and better and better as we go. So that's my job, is looking for those new technologies. I mean, I see flow as being a real opportunity. The cost needs to come down, but that could be an opportunity. And as we go along, we're probably going to see these get to a cost point where it makes sense to implement, and that's what we'll do. And that's the power as an integrator, is that we have the ability to take our experience in energy storage, apply it to new technologies, and provide that full package to our clients.
Excellent. Well, how can our listeners reach you, Jason?
Well, you can email me at jbeacock, jbeacock at Eneon-ES.com. You can check out our website. There's information to get in touch with us there. We're all over LinkedIn, so check that out. Got a number of big announcements coming down the pipe on LinkedIn, so look for that. And call me anytime. I'm always available for a chat. Again, if it's anything to do with energy storage and solar plus storage or whatever it is, or if it's, your oil and gas professional looking to understand how you can transition out of that space, always willing to have conversations. And I really appreciate you having me on today and giving me the opportunity to talk about our fun little company. And it's great watching your progression as well, and seeing all the great people you have on the podcast. And yeah, I really appreciate it. And maybe we can connect 5 years down the road when we're the guys. So thank you again.
Oh, definitely. We will definitely have you guys back on the show as the industry progresses. Thanks for mentioning the podcast. You can reach all of our content here at Continental at cesnrg.com/podcast. We are doing 2 of these interviews plus a clean power hour with John Weaver a week. So we're dropping 3 videos. Last week, we posted a video with NREL and their hybrid optimization performance platform, otherwise known as HOP, for modeling hybrid power plants. And a hybrid power plant is anything with multiple generation sources. So think wind, solar, and storage. And then we bring you technologies like the T29 tracker by Sunfolding, which is a very innovative air-driven single-axis tracker for the solar industry. We bring you thought leaders like Jake Rosemarin and his 5 clean tech trends for 2021. And we bring you solar developers like Kristen Forns from Engie, one of the largest solar and storage developers in North America. I mentioned the Clean Power Hour. Myself and solar installer and general contractor John Weaver, who is also a journalist for PV Magazine, do a weekly roundup of the solar and storage news of the day. So check it out at CES-NRG. You can reach me, TG Montague, on Twitter or on LinkedIn. So it's easy to find me. I want to thank my guest, Jason Beacock with Eneon-ES, for coming on the show today. And I want everybody to have a wonderful day, and let's grow solar and storage. Thanks a lot, Jason.